All right, what's going on, guys? It's Simple Sports back again with another episode. Didn't put one up last week. With it being the holidays, I just sort of went into my little shell and didn't really do a whole lot. Probably should have, but hey, I took the day off, or I took the week off, so I figured I would actually take the week off. So, nonetheless, here we are back. Another episode. Week 12 is in the books, heading into week 13. Got one more game tonight, the Monday night game. And then we'll be, week 12 will be officially in the books for good. Got a lot to talk about today. Not going to make it too long, hopefully. But definitely got a lot to touch on. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is football Sunday, NFL. We had a Thursday night game, which was not watchable. And then Sunday, which was actually pretty exciting. It was a bunch of really good games, which was refreshing considering last week there were only 2 or 3 that were actually competitive. This week, not so much. There were still a couple of blowouts, but definitely a lot more competitive across the board, which is nice. As much as I am a fan of football and a fan of the Titans and all that good stuff, I also just like watching football, and I do want to watch a game that's competitive. So this week was a lot better for that. And we're going to get started. I'm not going to go through every game, as I said, but I do want to touch on a few things. My first and my biggest question is there any team that can beat the Patriots? No. Let's just call it what it is. The Patriots are the class of the league right now. And I know the Eagles have the best record by a game, and I get all that. And for the year, I guess, if you want to say power rankings or just rankings in general, things like that, if you want to just talk about who's the best in that regard, then sure, I'll go with the Eagles. But if you were to tell me right now, take the best team in the NFC and the best team in the AFC, which to me are the Eagles and the Patriots, and who would win that matchup for the Super Bowl, got to go with the Pats. And a lot of people were concerned with them in the beginning of the year. I was one of those who was not, and was just saying, hey, just wait it out. It'll take care of itself, and it has, and it appears to have been taken care of. Everything seems to be in working order. I'm not saying it's perfect. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement, but that's, with every team in every situation. So the Pats 33-8 over the Raiders. The Raiders, albeit having a down year, still a solid football team. They're not good, especially defensively. They're atrocious on defense. And I'm sorry, this is from last week, not this week. They played the Dolphins this week, which, again, same sort of story. Dolphins are a okay team. They're not the worst in the league, but they're definitely not one of the best teams, obviously. But still, 35-17 win. I watched the game. One of the things that stood out to me was how weird it is to see the Pats make mistakes. And they made a couple of mistakes. And every team makes mistakes. No team plays a perfect game. I mean, you'd like to say overall you play as close to perfectly as you can, and that would be the Pats. Like, overall, big picture, they play as pretty close to perfect or, very, very well as you can. But they made a couple of mistakes, and it was just odd to see because, it's not something that you normally see from the Patriots. Is them making mistakes, turning the ball over, things like that. So, little things to clean up, but again, overall, I don't even see where there's any contention from anyone, at least not in the AFC. I know the Steelers are right on their heels in terms of record, but it doesn't come off the screen that way for sure. My eye test tells me the Pats are the team to beat. And right now, if I had to pick a Super Bowl winner, it would be the Pats, even though I picked them preseason. And it's not necessarily a unpopular pick, obviously. I'm not breaking the internet with my pick, but again, they just looked like the best team in the league just by eye test for me. A couple other teams I want to touch on really quickly. Cowboys, for those of you who doubted what I said or didn't believe what anyone was saying about Dak Prescott, I hope you have enough proof now. I'm not saying he's not a good quarterback. In fact, I think he is a good quarterback, but he's not this elite guy, this Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Drew Brees type guy that everyone, especially Cowboys fans or Dak Prescott fans, wants him to be. He's just not that. I'd be okay if there was a drop off, and in fact, you would almost expect, well, you would expect a drop off when you lose a guy like Ezekiel Elliott and Sean Lee, and for a couple of games, Smith, the left tackle, Tyron Smith. You expect a little bit of a drop off. I just didn't expect to see what I'm seeing for 3 straight games, and last game in particular being pretty bad for Dak Prescott. So I just hope all the Cowboys fans are humbled a little bit, although that's next to impossible. So Cowboys fans being humbled is pretty much non-existent. But I can cross my fingers. I can pray. I hope that, you guys see the light. They're just not a good football team. Zeke makes them go, and when Zeke's not there, they don't go. It's that simple. The Panthers got a win yesterday. I'm starting to believe in that team more, only if Cam Newton can play better, because Cam Newton yesterday was terrible, okay? And if he can put together even a average game for the rest of the year with that defense, or really with the team in general. Now, the Jets aren't the greatest team, but for them to have played as bad as for Cam to have played as bad as he played, and they still won the game, and not only that, but they scored 35 points, that's pretty good, team-wise. So if Cam can step it up, they might make some noise in the playoffs, but he has to step it up big time, because, again, yesterday in the playoffs is not going to cut it. I saw a lot of people today talking about the Falcons, whether or not they're back. They're not. Okay, they played the Bucs. Relax. Just, it is what it is. The Rams got the win over the Saints, which was nice. They were one of my preseason sleeper teams. I didn't think they'd be this good. I thought they could win 8 or 9 games possibly, but they seem to be on the road to, 13-3, something like that. Like, they're legit. And it totally came. I'm not going to say I called that. I definitely didn't call that. But I did expect them to be pretty good this year. I just didn't expect them to be this good. They're a legitimate threat to go, 13-3, 12-4, something like that. Did not expect that at all from them. Not that good. Again, 7, 8, 9 wins, something like that. I did not see this coming at all. So shout out to the Rams. Saints, I think more than anything, let that one, I won't say let the game slip away, but just, I don't think they brought their A game yesterday. So I'm not going to read too much into that loss. But I am impressed by the Rams going to get that win. So it's pretty nice to see another team sort of rising through the mud that they were in for a couple of years to finally be a viable contender, which is, again, it's cool to see. Steelers, as I said, they're a good team. Obviously, they'll make the playoffs. They'll do all that good stuff. They'll probably be in the AFC Championship game against the Pats. I just don't think they're good enough to beat the Pats. The Jags, another team that, much like Tennessee, I think given their position, I don't know how things are going to shake out in the next couple of weeks, but they seem like they're going to be the other AFC wildcard team. And much like Tennessee, I don't think they're going to make any noise. But again, I think for Jags fans, for Titans fans, I think a lot of those fans simply want their team to be in the playoffs for now, because there's been such a long stretch of mediocrity. Well, that's a compliment, honestly. But there's been such a long stretch of just bad football from both of those teams that I don't think they would expect to go from, a 10-year drought in Titans' case of missing the playoffs from drought to Super Bowl, over the course of essentially a season, because they missed it last year. So I don't see that, but I do think for them to make the playoffs for fans would be nice. Same thing with the Jags. The Chiefs, it's time for Alex Smith to go. I don't know if he would be the backup or any of those things, but when I say go, I mean go to the bench. It's time for Mahomes. Alex Smith is not that guy. He's a solid quarterback. He's a quote-unquote franchise quarterback. As far as, is he going to kill your franchise? No. But can he be a solid quarterback for a franchise for 7 to 10 years? Sure. But with this team, with the Chiefs team, with that roster, and again, their defense has suffered some injuries. But with that roster and that quarterback situation, their roster isn't good enough for their quarterback to be as bad as he is. Let me put it that way. For example, the Jaguars. Blake Bortles is a terrible quarterback. In fact, they should have won that game yesterday. Calais Campbell got a fumble recovery for a touchdown late in the game. And if I'm not mistaken, Blaine Gabbert then threw a pick to give the ball back to them at like midfield. And then Blake Bortles, being the piss poor quarterback that he is, threw a pick. And I mean, it was one of those it's such a bad decision that he made to throw that ball. And I mean, Tyrann Mathieu it was 100% no guessing all the way. He knew exactly where he was going with the football. He jumped it, he picked it, and that was that. Game over, which I'm happy about because that brought us back to a tie. And actually, technically, we're in first place in the division, third place in the conference. So I was happy with it. But as a Jags fan, that was brutal to watch. So that's just my quick recap of the week. Again, we have the game tonight, Texans-Ravens, largely unimportant. It would be nice for the Texans to win, just so that's one less team that the Titans would have to worry about as far as a wild card spot. But I don't think they will. I think the Ravens will get the win. I just think, especially with Deshaun Watson being out there, just a better team. But we'll see. Again, I don't think either team is really poised to make any, especially not the Texans. The Ravens, I don't think they're poised to make any noise. But it would be nice to have them just mathematically eliminated. I'm not saying that's going to happen on a loss tonight, but the closer they can get to that, obviously would be better for Titans fans and Jags fans as well. So we'll see how that one shakes out. Should be a good game as far as just watching football, but I don't think the Ravens – I think the Ravens get the win tonight, but I think long term I don't think it's going to last. So let me talk about the Titans really quick. I've about given up on them because they've been such a disappointment this year. And the only reason I haven't is because they have still won games, and therefore they're still in it. They're in third place. And think about how much different the story would be on them, just for a moment. If they beat the Steelers and then they got this win, whether they were both ugly or not, which yesterday's win was, but just for the sake of argument, let's say they beat the Steelers. They are then sitting in second place with a bye in the AFC, and their first game would be the Ravens, maybe, or the Jags, depending on how that division shakes out, or maybe the Chiefs, Chargers. Well, Chargers will probably win that division. So Chiefs, Raiders, or it's not Raiders, Ravens. Who else could they potentially play? The Bills. All of those games are winnable. That's the thing that frustrates me, is not only do they have a chance to get a bye and make it into the playoffs for the first time in 10 years, but also win a playoff game. Like, you know, it's... And just because they lost that one game, now they are sitting in third place, but they're looked at a lot less favorably as they would have been if they had beaten the Steelers. So it just goes to show you how one game, one play, one drive, one possession, one decision could change the narrative so heavily. They're really disappointing. I think, again, as I said in my last video, I think they'll make the playoffs just because that division is so bad. My only thing is I'm not reserving any hope for them to win a playoff game. Depending on the matchup, maybe. But even then, there's some teams who tend to show up when they don't necessarily need to and not show up when they absolutely need to. Like the Jaguars last year, when you wanted them, like they were the team last year, everyone was like, oh my God, this team is loaded. They're going to win the division, make it to the playoffs. And then they had they laid the egg that they did last year. And then for the Titans, in the same sense, last year they snuck up on a lot of people. And then the game that they needed to win in order to make the playoffs and win the division against the Jaguars, they got beat by like 30 points. And so my point is the Titans are a team that will randomly win a game that you never would have expected. Case in point, last year, like the Broncos, the Packers, those are two games that they won pretty handily, especially the Packers last year. And then this year, you take a game like the Texans, sort of pre-Deshaun Watson, or at least before we really knew what he was, or like the Dolphins, or like the Browns, or something like that, where they play a god-awful game. They lose by 40 in one case. They lose to a pretty poor division rival in another case, and then they go out and barely, and I mean, they don't score a single touchdown against the Browns, and it takes the Browns being the Browns in order for them to win that game. So, you know, I think it'll be nice for them to make the playoffs, but I don't expect much outside of that. Pretty disappointed. Mariota has got to play better. He's got to play a lot better. That's an understatement. I think the rest of the team actually has played pretty well for the most part. DeMarco Murray I think he's starting to show his age, but I think it's good because Derrick Henry is also starting to show the rest that he was sort of able to get last year after coming out of Bama, where he was the absolute workhorse, and then he gets to Tennessee where they have a top 10 running back in DeMarco Murray, and at least last year. And so Henry was kind of able to do a couple of things. He was able to get real game experience. He was able to learn behind a good veteran running back. And he was also able to get a little rest as far as not being the guy that's going to carry it 25, 30 times a game. He was only getting maybe 10, 12 carries, something like that. And so he was sort of able to kind of come off of that bang year at Alabama, come into the league, get some real experience, get some good touches, be productive, learn behind a vet, while also getting a little bit of rest on his body. I think it's time for DeMar. I'm not ready to put him at second string yet, but I definitely think it's time to at least explore it. It's definitely something that should be explored, or the carry should at least balance out more, and I think they have in recent weeks. Partially due to Murray having an injury. I might be a little bit banged up. I don't know. But Derrick Henry looked really good. I think he had like 79 yards. But Mariota's just got to play better. It's that simple. And if they're going to win and make it to the playoffs and possibly win a playoff game, he has to play a lot better. I do want to talk about the fight Talib and Crabtree just briefly. First, my overall thoughts on it are, I don't understand how professionals who are on like national TV ever do things like that. Now, saying that, I played football before, and you know it's an emotional game. I'm not saying that you can expect them to, you know, sort of retaliate or react in a very emotional way, because of all the sports, it's probably the most emotional. On top of the fact that it's sort of legalized violence, where you actually have the ability to retaliate in a quote-unquote violent manner towards someone that you don't like, may have said something, may have done something. You can legally attack them, so to speak, in football. So you have emotional people. Some people are a little laid back. Some people that you'll never get that out of. And then there's some people who you're going to get that out of all the time, and that's Aqib Talib. He's one of those players, and it's one of those things I try to explain to people who ask me about what it is I do and why I like sports so much. And it's like, you sit here and you play sports as a kid growing up, as in your adult life. Some people play, and here's the thing: the sport itself never changes. Okay, whether you're playing football in high school, in college, semi-pro, or what have you, NFL, the sport itself doesn't change. The speed at which it plays, the high level at which it plays, the physicality, all of those things change. But you still play football, right? You still go to the gym and play basketball. You still go to the park and play baseball. It's just, it's a national stage. There's people watching. There's people who genuinely care about what you do. Whereas when I go to the flag football field, Market Commons, no one cares. Like, it's not like I don't have, 20,000 people coming out of Myrtle Beach to watch me play flag football, whereas you would have that if you played in the NFL. But again, you're playing football, right? And my point is, when you play, there's always a couple of people that you know what, I better not say or do the wrong thing to that guy. Some people have a screw loose. Some people are a little wired differently, a little unhinged. And some people are just ready, like they're boiling over, and all they're waiting for you to do is take the lid off. And sometimes it takes very, very little to do so. I played with guys like that. I know people like that. I myself was a trash talker, not necessarily a fighter. And I mean, I was aggressive. But I wasn't. There's a difference between being aggressive and seeking out fights, right? And Talib seems to be one of those players who, you don't want to push his buttons. You don't want to push his buttons. And there were people like that for me. I knew if I went and talked to a certain player a certain way, like, the reaction you're going to get. And if you push the right people's buttons, you're going to get a negative reaction. I played with a couple of people, even in high school, that I played with that were like, we're all marginal players. None of us are good as far as like, none of us are going to the league or anything like that. Like we are playing the part of the high school kid who's playing football. And still you have those guys who you don't want to push their buttons. Now, I'm not saying it was justified by either one. I think they both should be suspended. I think it's both, the entire thing is ugly for the league. But my point is, when you're in that situation, you also need to know what you're getting yourself into. And Crabtree punched Chris Harris in the stomach, and Chris Harris basically sent him to the hitman and, let him handle it. Now, I don't know if that is what actually sparked the fight, because he snatched the chain during that little scuffle. I don't know if that's what actually sparked it, or if the initial thing with Chris Harris is what sparked it and then it just got out of hand. Because you had to know there was going to be a confrontation. The second that he did that and he got on the field with Talib, you had to know something's coming. They had a similar, I shouldn't say similar, but they had an altercation last year with the Titans where Harry Douglas threw a low block, and I think it was dirty. Legal, I don't know. I don't remember the play right offhand. I don't think it was illegal, but it was definitely one of those plays like, dude, you don't have to do that, right? Like, we know there's situations, for example, the Titans played the Seahawks earlier this year. Richard Sherman had a late hit on Mariota as he was running out of bounds. Now, I personally, just looking at the play, separating the rules and sort of morals and all that stuff, the play itself, I really didn't have a problem with. It looked a lot worse than it actually was in full speed, but I didn't necessarily have a problem with the play. But it was one of those situations where it's like, like, that's one you're not going to get away with. The guy's running out of bounds. He's almost down. He's already being tackled. He's already running out of bounds. Let him go out of bounds. Like, you don't have to do that, right? And I think this is a similar situation where Crabtree did the thing with Chris Harris. He's going to retaliate. But as men, like, when you're crossing the line. And Crabtree crossed the line first. He had to know there was going to be some retaliation. The fight was ugly. They both need to be suspended. I don't know if you give them more than a game, at most 2 games, I guess. I don't really know. I don't deal in the punishment world, but for me, if they got suspended for a game, I wouldn't bat an eye. But they do need to be suspended. But yeah, again, there's certain people you don't push their buttons. Talib's one of them. And if you do push their buttons, then you just have to know what you're getting yourself into. That's all. And I was the same way. Like, I knew there were certain people I was going to talk, because I talk trash, and that's what helps me go. But I knew there were certain people, if I talk trash to so-and-so, I better be ready to duke it out if it came to that. or, I better be ready to sort of pull the reins back a little bit once I see it going out of control. Crabtree has to know that. I would imagine that he did. And for that, I think they both should be suspended. They both knew what they were getting into. It is what it is. So that's it for the NFL for this week. My 4 best teams as of right now: Pats, Steelers, and AFC. And I'm going with the Eagles. And I have a toss-up right now between the Rams and the Saints. I'm not 100% sure. My gut tells me the Saints. I don't buy the Vikings yet just because I know they're having a great season, but I just don't buy that situation in playoffs. I don't think that's going to work. I think they need to get that figured out before the playoffs come. And then if that were the case, if they had that figured out, I think they'd be fine. I don't buy them right now. So Rams and the Saints, I'm leaning more towards Saints, and then the Eagles in the NFC. Moving on to the NBA for a little bit. Not going to spend too much time on this or college football, but I do want to touch on a few things. Lonzo Ball is continuing to struggle. I think people need to lay off. He's a rookie. Relax, okay? He'll get it together. And if he doesn't, then he can be considered a bust. But you can't judge the guy 2 months into his first season, ever, and say he's a bust or he's not a bust, or he's a great talent or he's not a great talent, or he's an average player. He's a rookie is what he is. He's still learning to play basketball. You got to give him some time. I'm not saying you can't criticize him or give him praise when he does good or criticize him when he does bad. All I'm saying is don't lean so heavily one way or the other 2 months into his entire career. The guy could play for 15 years, and you were ripping him his first 2 months of his career. Look at Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant shot 3-4 air balls in his first game with the game on the line. And look what he turned out to be. I'm not saying Lonzo Ball is going to be Kobe Bryant, but my point is, if you were to judge Kobe's career on his first season, he wouldn't even be discussed. It wasn't that good. But that's the point of growing up and maturing and physically growing up into your body and all of those things. That's a part of sports. I got away for a long time simply being the bigger, faster, stronger guy. And then as I progressed and got to college and moved on, I realized, there's a lot of better athletes. There's a ton of athletes better than me. So it takes time. Just relax. LeBron James is playing out of his mind right now, having one of, if not his best year ever. The more I look at the situation, the more I start to believe that the Lakers is out of the question. And I won't even say out of the question. I just think it's off the table right now. Set aside just for a little while. My gut feelings tells me he is going to stay in Cleveland. And I guess you can look at it two ways, because my theory is, why would he leave if he knows he's not going to win? But you can also say, well, why wouldn't he leave if he knows he's not going to win? If he knows he's not going to win, does he really want to stay in Cleveland? I don't know. That one I'm going to leave alone for a while. We'll revisit that as we get, midway and towards the end of the season, and obviously after the season. The Sixers, I really like Ben Simmons. He is another one that, especially as he grows and matures and even gets a little bit bigger and more physically imposing, even though he already is, but as he gets more in that realm, he's going to be a problem for the league. He's going to be a big problem. Kyrie Irving playing pretty well. MVP-like. I wouldn't be mad if he won the MVP. In fact, I hope he does, just because the story that would create, especially if they were to beat the Cavs in the playoffs, the story and the chaos that would send the NBA world and its fans into, I want to see that desperately. So I'm rooting for Kyrie. I'm rooting for the Celtics, even though I'm a Lakers fan. But story-wise, I'm 100% rooting for the Celtics. OKC struggling still. I think they'll get it figured out by the end of the season. I just don't think that they're a good enough team to beat Golden State. I don't think they're a good enough team to beat Houston right now. Now, I think instead of last year being swept, I think it goes 6 or 7 games. But based on what I see currently, I don't think they're good enough to beat very many teams in the West. Maybe the top 4. Well, I don't even know if there is a top 4. Who would be the 4th? Aside from OKC, they probably would be the 4th, right? But I still don't think they're good enough to beat Golden State. I don't think they're good enough to beat Golden State, Houston, or San Antonio. Anyone else after that, we'll see. But those 3, which are the 3 that matter, I don't see it. And then last, I do want to talk about Golden State. They seem to have sort of hit their stride, albeit KD was hurt or out for a while. But they seem to be on track. I think I wouldn't be opposed to shortening the NBA season just for me personally, just because here's my NBA watch pattern, right? I watch the first, say, 5-6 games of the season from a certain group of teams. Then I don't really watch it all until about the All-Star break. Right after the All-Star break, I'll watch a little bit of it. And then I'll watch the closing of the season, the regular season, and then obviously the playoffs and the finals. I'm not that interested right now. I'm just not. There's not a whole lot for me that's going on. The stories that I want to know about are being talked about 24/7 in the news media. The Lakers, LeBron, Lonzo, Golden State, OKC. Storylines I want to follow. I don't need to watch the games to follow because there's so many games. I don't need to understand 82 games worth of what I'm seeing in an NBA season. I just watch the news. I listen to radio, watch the news, or read articles. I watch games, but not nearly with the detail that I watch the NFL and college football. Not nearly. Again, towards the end of the season, yes, but early on, no. So that's it. I do want to talk about a little bit of college football. Let me go over that stuff real quick. First of all, Bama lost. Thank you. I don't like Bama. I'm a Buckeye fan, and yes, I know the Buckeyes have lost twice this year. I don't care. Bama lost, so it is what it is. Ohio State, Michigan was a solid game, at least for a while. They lost J.T. Barrett with that weird cameraman thing. I don't know what that's all about. But they did get the win. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to get into the playoffs. We'll see. I think what they really need is a very, very, very convincing win over Wisconsin to the likes of what they had the year they won the national championship, which I don't think they're going to get. I think that year they won like 63-0 or 63-6 or something like that, whatever the score was. I don't think that they need 63 points and they don't need to win by 60, but I think something on the order of like 42-20, something like that, is necessary for them to win, for them to make the playoff. I don't know if they have it in them. Wisconsin's defense is legit. Now, so is Ohio State's. But the thing with Ohio State is you never know what you're going to get on offense. You might get, 200 total yards, or you might get a 50-point explosion. Like, you just never know with them. And that's their biggest issue. They're so inconsistent on offense. You never know what you're going to get. So we'll see how that game goes. I think they need a blowout win over Wisconsin to make the top 4. But we'll see. I do think the top 4 will be Clemson. Actually, I don't know. We'll see after this weekend. See how some things shake up. And then I do want to talk about the quarterbacks coming in this year, I guess coming out of the college football world, going into the NFL for next year. Sam Darnold, I think, needs to stay. Josh Rosen, I think, needs to go. And Baker Mayfield needs to go. In fact, I think he has to go anyway. But Rosen and Darnold are – now – the only reason Rosen should stay is because they did just hire Chip Kelly, so that would be nice to get one more year with a really good coach to really see what he can do. But I think if he came out, he'd be the first quarterback picked anyway, so I don't think it's going to matter. Um, he's the only one I think is sort of like it's obviously his decision, but I think it's more like either he wants to stay or he wants to go. Like he's good either way for me. Darnold, I think, needs to stay. Baker Mayfield, I think, is going to be a solid NFL quarterback. Maybe not necessarily the elite of the elites, but maybe like a Phillip Rivers type. Very competitive, fiery guy. May not win you a Super Bowl or even a playoff game, but you'll be relevant and be competitive for 10 years at least with Baker Mayfield. But then again, in today's league, I mean, if you're not winning a playoff series or a playoff game by your second year or third year, then everyone considers you a bust anyway. So we'll see. I do think Rosen, I watched the USC-UCLA game. Rosen looked amazing. Darnold still looks unpolished, which I don't think surprises anyone. He still looks a little unpolished. Rosen looks the more NFL-ready guy. But I don't think that surprises anyone. I mean, Rosen, he made a couple of throws. Darnold did too, but Rosen made a couple of throws where, you're like, okay, yeah, he can do that. Yeah. And I'm done talking about college football for a second. I do want to jump back to Marcus Mariota for just a second, because what I just said made me realize something. And I said, Mariota has to play better, obviously. But here's what frustrates me about this team and about Mariota so much is if you watch Mariota play, it's almost like drive to drive, you get something different. And I watched them, and they came out fairly well. They played pretty flat the entire game against the Colts. But Mariota made a couple of he made a throw early on to Delaney Walker. It was like a 1 or 2 man route off of play action, and I'm not kidding. There had to be 5 to 6 defenders running behind, next to Delaney Walker. And he dropped the ball in. I mean, he, as Shannon Sharpe on Undisputed says, he walked it to him for about 30 yards. And it was an incredible throw. And then you come out and you see the interception. And you're like, huh? What? It doesn't make any sense. That's why it's so frustrating, because I watch him like, dude, he is pinpoint accurate when he throws the ball for the most part. And then he comes out and makes some questionable throws with some of these picks. And I know all the picks aren't necessarily on the quarterback. Some of them are tip balls from the receiver, some of this, some of that. They're not always the quarterback's fault, but he throws a lot of them. He threw one against Pittsburgh, the first one, I believe, that just completely sailed on him. Now, one of the picks that he threw yesterday didn't appear to be his fault. Taywan Taylor was running like a corner route, and it's hard to tell what kind of route he was running from the view you get, but it looked like a corner or just an out route, something like that, and he fell down on the play, and, that led to a pick. That one I can't necessarily blame on Taylor, but it also looked like the ball might have been a little high anyway. So at worst case scenario, Taylor goes up, he maybe deflects the ball, he can't quite reach it, he tips it, it goes out of bounds or something like that. Or, he catches it, obviously would be the best case. But point being, like, that's one that it's just not on him. At least it doesn't appear to be. Now, you never know. Maybe Taylor didn't run his route deep enough. Maybe, he could have cut the route short, and obviously him falling down doesn't help. But I'm just saying, like, there could be a lot of reasons. The ball sailed on Mariota a little bit, it looks like. So there's a lot of things that could necessarily not be his fault, but he threw the pick. It is what it is. I think he needs to play a lot better for them to actually make some noise in the playoffs. I think they have every aspect of the game at this point pretty well covered. They're not a great defensive team. They're a good defensive team that seems to be able to get key and timely stops, like towards the end of games, things like that. They seem to be capable of doing that. They let up a few yards. They give up the fewest amount of chunk plays in the league, which is good. I think they consider that like plays over 20 yards. They have the fewest in the league. So their defense doesn't give up the big play. They do give up stupid plays. But they seem to be, again, they're not like the Baltimore Ravens of 2000 or the Broncos or the Seahawks or anything like that. They're not even close to that. But, again, I think their defense is good enough that they can make timely stops when they need to. And they seem to have a good idea of how to win games. Like, they went down yesterday, and it's like, okay, boom, the game is on the line. We need a touchdown. And they went down, and they handed the ball to Henry. They threw a couple of passes, and they went down and scored a touchdown, into the game. So they seem to have every phase special teams. They actually get some decent returns. They broke a couple for a touchdown, Dory Jackson did, but they got called back for penalties. But they can get a good return out of him, even if it's 35 yards instead of 25 yards on the touchback, or maybe like a 40-yard punt return, 20-yard punt return, something like that. Just any little thing that could spark the team. Like, they have every aspect covered. They have a good tight end. They have good receivers. They have good running backs. They have a good offensive line. They have a solid defense. Not great, but not bad. They're solid on special teams. Don't give up, punt returns and kick returns for touchdowns. Don't necessarily get them themselves, but they do get decent return. Like, every aspect of the game they have. It's just one piece that seems to be lagging behind, and that's Marcus Mariota. Do better. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.